Hey y'all, this is Lenore with my podcast for My History Verified. Now, of course, on the podcast, you know that it is all audio, no video. And so that gives us, me and you, the chance to relax and kind of go over some things that I am experiencing on my end and seeing if you can relate. Down the line on a live chat or at TikTok, maybe you can shoot me a question and I will be able to help you with your family tree research. Now, how did I get started with my ancestry? I, let's see. Well, I always been very eager to learn. I was very curious, I should say, about my mother's side. I never wanted to know anything about my mother's father's side, even though I grew up with my great-grandmother, meaning I visited her every summer south of Chicago, about 40, 50, let's say 50 miles south of Chicago. Visited her every year since being in my mom's stomach. So that began in the early 70s, all the way up until my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Wilburn, passed away. She passed away in 2005. I think at that time she was 83. She did yield from, I think, Grenada or Pickens, Mississippi. And from there, with my mother's mother, she and her son, which is my grandfather, left, now I guess I can say it now, Tula, Mississippi, and headed to St. Louis. From St. Louis, they went to, actually came to Illinois, and they ended up residing in Chicago, Illinois. Now, at some point, excuse me, my great-grandmother ended up moving, like I say, 50 or 60 miles south of Chicago, on farmland. And it is actually near a sundown town, if not a sundown town in itself. She had a farm. The farm was cultivated by someone who paid her to. They actually pay her to allow them to plant seeds and cultivate it, harvest it every year. So I actually saw this with my own eyes, and when I saw it, I thought it was the Caucasian that was doing the harvesting. I thought it was his land. The land actually went so far back, it ended up going to like a forest. So that meant that there was 2 houses on the land, and then behind that was crops, corn, tomatoes, watermelons, I believe, tomatoes, definitely, onions, and some other things. Don't quote me on the onions, but there were a lot of different vegetables on that land. And there were 2 houses that I remember, that I know of. I personally were in the 2 houses. Did not know my great-grandmother owned them, but I do remember her always saying that you need to own land. You have to own your own land. You have to own your own land. She was very big on owning land. So at that time, I did not know that she actually owned over, I guess it was like 20 acres in this southern part of Illinois, south of Chicago. Did not know it. How I found out, I saw the man in the back on the the John Deere, and I said, "Grandma, it's a man back there, and he sure is taking care of his land." I think I remember saying something like that, and she said, "They said, hey, and this is how they talk." This is my land. And she continued by saying, he gives me money for my land. And I was like, whoa. So I think I was no more than 7 years old at that time when I found out that my great grandmother owned that land. So after her clarifying that, she began to tell me about her and her husband having built the houses on the land, and it was their land. And that's how I ended up finding out about my great grandmother's property. Um, what was on there was this beautiful white house. And it was 2 stories high, which means that you had to climb up the stairs. It was a white frame, beautiful. It was actually better looking and prettier than the one that my great grandmother was residing in, which was a ranch, and it actually looked like a barn. I thought it was a mansion, but it definitely looked like a barn. It was ranch, front door, back door, a huge long washroom, but it wasn't a working toilet, although a toilet was in there. We used pots for the toilets, pumped water. There was a well on the outside of the house that we pumped water in and brought it in. And the water tasted like metal, of course. We boiled that water, washed dishes, had a bucket for sanitizing, a bucket for cold, fresh water. So it was really, really country living. She made homemade biscuits every day. Well, it was every day, definitely every morning. Um, of course, the salt pork, scrambled eggs, and it was a recipe that I saw her making every day, but consciously did not think to get the recipe. Now, in, I'm a much older person at this point, and I guess I thought that they would live forever. So I never asked her for her recipe, although I did ask my maternal grandmother for a lot of her recipes. So I did get a lot of her recipe, my grandmother's recipes, and my mother's recipes. But that country living taught me how to survive besides where I grew up in on the west side of Chicago, which helped to cultivate who I was as well. But going there every summer, when I was a kid, in my mother's womb, as a kid, and then I think at the age of like 6 or 7 years old, me and my brother would either be driven to my great grandmother's house by my parents' car, my grandfather's car, or they would put me and my brother on the Greyhound. We would drive to downtown Chicago, and me and my brother would be put on the Greyhound or the Amtrak for travel from Chicago to that southern farm where my great grandmother was. But she had to drive out of the country to the town next to it to get me and my brother from the Greyhound or the train. Then we would drive all the way back east to the Illinois and Indiana state line, excuse me, and where our summer would begin. It actually would begin from the time that she picked us up and that long drive down, heading east, and then, the winding fields to get to the house, and then the country living. Now, on that farm, we had, well, what my grandmother did not have. She had chickens. I think it was a goat. Of course, dogs. I can't remember what else. Now, her neighbors had hundreds of chickens. Another neighbor had a pecan tree. Down further was, I believe, peaches. Don't quote me on the peaches. Definitely berries. And before we even got to our house, like 3 houses excuse me, on the same road, there were horses. So I began to learn how to ride a horse very early on, 7 years old. So I was exposed to what today some people would think was not only country, but poor living. My grandmother thought it was a mansion, the house that she was in. I haven't even described the White House next to it. Come to find out, my great grandmother owned that house as well. And that was the cleanest, prettiest house, crisp, running water, everything. But my great grandmother didn't want to live in that house. And then sooner, as I got older and a teenager, she had that house torn down. She said she personally told me she did not like that house. And so that house got torn down. This is part of my learning of who my ancestors are, and who my, living with them, loving on them, being taught different things. Like my great grandmother taught me about the Church of God in Christ, or, I don't want to say religion, but spirituality. I attended a church there. I also was the church Sunday school, I think, treasurer, if not secretary. So I counted the money and recorded the money, and then after Sunday school, told the amount, recorded it, and put it away until next time. So that's kind of how my summers went. Um, what else? With my grandmother coming from the South, she left the South when she was 13 years old. I'll tell you later on down on another podcast why she left, but she did leave with my great grandmother, which was her mother in law, and her husband at the time. My grandmother she couldn't have been no more than 14 or 15, married already and with one child, born in Mississippi. So when they left Mississippi, they went to St. Louis, where she delivered another child, and then came to Chicago, where my mom was born in 1955. Um, my maternal grandmother has 5 children. One is deceased, which is my mom, and my mom is the third child. So she has 2 older siblings and 2 younger siblings, and my mom passed away at the same moment, same second, with um, with my dad, her husband, of 47 years in 2017. Shortly after, my brother did not feel that. He just was sad from the moment they passed. He and my only sibling passed away a year and a half, a year and a half shortly after that. So we're still in the time frame of when they all just passed away. So they are now considered my ancestors. Um, my findings, oh my goodness, I don't want to give it all out during this podcast, but wait till you find out who my ancestors are on my maternal side and my paternal side. Goodness gracious. I There are moments that I cry. There are moments that I feel alone because I don't have the meaning interested parties in this subject of ancestry and genealogy, searching the family tree. And then there are moments that I realize that, hey, is actually researching deceased people. And so it took me a while to look at it like that, as to why a lot of people did not do, even in my family, do not feel that it actually is boring to them. It is, not interesting, and it involves deceased people that they probably don't want to talk about. Me, on the other hand, is interesting finding out what each person did, where they lived, how many children they had, finding out more than one marriage, more than one set of children, where they migrated from, if they were or not in any indigenous Amerindian tribes. Those things are very, very important to doing ancestry. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it there until we meet again. Thank you for visiting my podcast, My History Verified.